Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We have lots to discuss today. We have lots of reporters and everyone scrambling to get out of Florida because there's a monsoon going on there. That makes me very glad, Russ, that I don't cover the Stanley Cup Final with a Florida to Edmonton excursion.
Yeah, I normally do, but I just saw this time being disastrous is just a word, so
Yeah, so but we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. We haven't talked about him in about a month.
Shocking.
Everybody said, "Oh, look, Aaron Rodgers is a good guy. He's showing up before OTAs. He's throwing the ball around and everything." And then when he has to show up, he's not there. He's not going to be there for the whole week. And I have a problem with this because you're asking new players to basically, hey, come learn the playbook, learn everything, learn all my plays, and then in August I'll catch up with you guys and see how you do. I mean, I don't care that he had a trip scheduled. He should have rescheduled it. It's a bad look. You shouldn't do it. It doesn't matter if it's his right to do it and pay the fines. It's a bad team move. And no matter what, I don't know why the Jets allowed him to do it, honestly.
I don't think they have any control here, Ted. He's a prima donna. He's been a prima donna going back to the days with the Packers. He's an attention whore. I mean, and going to New York was just going to feed into that whoredom. And now, I heard somebody say this morning, there was never any chance he was going to come back from the torn Achilles last year, but he had to keep selling that just to stay in the news. And now he makes news by not showing up. I'm not saying he's a reprehensible human being, but he shuffles to his own the beat of his own drum, and he doesn't care what anybody else thinks.
Exactly. I mean, I think the problem with the Jets is basically, they're built around him as a starter, and if he gets hurt, which behind that line is pretty more likely than not, and they're not allowing them to get a real competent backup quarterback, then the Jets will be back where they were last year, depending on the defense and hoping, they can string enough wins to get in the playoffs. But, this is just not a good fit for anybody because, Rodgers probably can't stay healthy because he's not enough of a scrambling quarterback to survive back there. And the Jets obviously can't hook their wagon to anyone else and, get an insurance policy that's viable.
Well, I mean, Tyrod Taylor is at least an NFL quarterback. Is he a good one? Well, Ted, you and I know from his days with the Bills that he's not, but at least I think he's better than Zach Wilson. Yeah. And he does have some mobility, so he might be able to survive behind that line when Rodgers can. I mean, Rodgers he's going to be like the old Dan Marino in his days with Miami. He's going to be 3-step drop and throw. And the pressure may not mean anything to him, but I don't know how successful of an offense that you can run doing that. So
they got basically it's a 1-year thing, and they're going to be in a holding pattern again. If he's not healthy, it's obviously it makes their playoff odds a lot longer. The AFC East is a little bit more winnable than it was last year, so it's kind of an opportunity lost.
Yeah. All right, Boris. I know there was something baseball related I was wanting to touch on, and I'm now just drawing a complete blank. So maybe we'll save it for Friday. But
okay.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, June 12th, 2024.
We don't plan this. I'm Pete Tessie in moist Winnipeg.
Russ going from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com, and we are pleased to be joined by our frequent guest, Ted Starkey. You can go to Ted Starkey on X to read his stuff, and he is extremely insightful on the world of hockey, and at least he roots for the right football team there, Russ. Okay, let's start with the Stanley Cup Final, which is shifting to Edmonton for Game 3 tomorrow. Of course, they took 2 days in between Game 2 and Game 3 because the NBA Final was tonight. So they didn't want, God forbid, that they didn't want to clash with the almighty and powerful NBA. because both of them are on ESPN/ABC. But the Panthers win 4-1 on Monday, and it was an extremely controversial game there, Ted, because of what happened midway through the third period, where Leon Draisaitl took basically a flying body block or flying elbow to the jaw of Alexander Barkov. Now, Barkov is practiced today, and it sounds like he's going to play, but I like that's beside the point. Again, it's one of these things where does a guy get suspended for the injury that he causes, or does he get suspended for the foul that he did? And of course, the NHL just said, "Oh, you're okay."
Yeah, it's basically, it's a Stanley Cup Final. If you're not dead, they won't suspend you. It's obviously one of those plays that, it's just a real greasy play you'll see in this stage of the playoffs because, Brad Marchand early this playoff said what everyone doesn't want to admit, that you're trying to hurt guys in the playoffs because it makes your road a lot easier. Mm-hmm. Some are a little bit more obvious, some are a little bit more under the radar, but, clearly with the Stanley Cup Final going on, a play like that, taking out the best defender against its high-powered Oiler team, it really, you figure he's not going to get suspended because of what the stage of the playoffs is. If this is game 50, he probably gets a couple games.
Right. Peter, I mean, there were enough fouls in that game that were obscured by what Draisaitl did to Barkov, the Sam Carrick cup check on Kulikov, the Fogel knee on Lusterinen that he got a 5 in a game for. But, I mean, from the reports I've heard, Draisaitl is dinged up, like I think everybody is at this point in the playoffs, but he's dinged up to the point where his effectiveness has been limited. And I almost got the thought after I heard that okay, I'm dinged up, so I'm going to take out their best player, and that's what he tried to do.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with what happened there is Draisaitl had the puck. He wasn't in a vulnerable position. Barkov had the puck. Draisaitl wasn't in a vulnerable. Barkov wasn't in a vulnerable position. Draisaitl came in. It was high. It wasn't the worst hit I've ever seen. But the problem is, you can't have rational conversations anymore about this. So for Edmonton fans, you've got to pick which side of the coin you're going to be on, and then you got to stay there, much like your politics. Sorry, Ted, I get to rant about Edmonton. It's a long story. I'll explain it to you off air. But the point is, you can't complain that McDavid didn't get a call on a breakaway with a Kachuk hook and then turn around and say, no, we need more, and then say, oh, it's too severe on Barkov. If there's even talk of him, too severe on Draisaitl, there's talk of him maybe getting supplementary discipline. You can't figure out when it's to your advantage and want the world to come down and not have it come down over there. And if the response to that is, oh, look, it's inconsistency in the NHL playoffs, that's not good enough. It's not good enough all season long. That is officiating. Live with it. And my Twitter feed's fairly full of Edmonton fans. And I get where you're coming from. However, no one put a halo of holy light around Connor McDavid and made him untouchable in anything. And the telling story about what a complete and utter lack of personality this guy must had is Kachuk sitting there behind the net after the breakaway, pushing him, shoving him, doing whatever he wants. McDavid's looking back at his team, and not one teammate came in to do anything.
And then
McDavid had to look over at the ref, and the linesman had to separate them. Where are the other 4 Oilers skaters? This is the kind of stuff you should be worrying about, not about, oh, poor Leon, and he might get supplementary. I mean, the level. I can't even believe the Edmonton fan club, which is the traveling Edmonton fan club, which is the Sportsnet media, isn't even going this deep, as bad as the Oilers fans are. And they were the ones who literally said Canucks fans were the worst. Oh, sorry, am I showing my bias? But the point here is, this is the playoffs. If you were asking for consistency to start in game two of the Stanley Cup Finals from the officials. What have you been watching all year? It's never consistent. Get over it and move along. Just keep yourself out of trouble.
Russ, clearly, after 2 games, the Panthers have won the psychological battle in this series. Because you look at Evan Bouchard, after he gave up the puck and he served up that pizza to Evan Rodriguez, he had a look of paranoia after I think Kachuk was mouthing at him, that he was like, oh my God, like, shut up, and dropping F-bombs. They've lost their cool. Kane tried to go after Montour. I think Draisaitl purposely went after Barkov. They're hurt right now, and they're trying to even the playing field by hurting the Panthers.
Yeah, look.
Okay, Russ, go, and then I want to ask something.
Okay. When the playoffs started, I saw other teams going after players that were hurt, trying to soften them up. So, as Marchand said, that's always happened, and it definitely happened this year. This isn't the only series that we're seeing it. As far as McDavid goes, after he got bloodied up first couple of minutes of the first game and nobody came to his aid, you knew there was a problem. And I knew there was a problem where, okay, Florida just tested you, Edmonton, and you failed. Right. Then McDavid failed because, look, just like in the NBA or any other league, if there's someone on your tail like that and you still are able to get a shot on goal, if you're a great player, you have to bury it. A lot of times in the NBA, a guy will get that shot in with a foul because he's getting hacked. You've got to score when you're getting hacked, and that was
Russ, you got to score, or you got to make it good enough to get the penalty shot.
Penalty. Either way, correct.
He didn't do either. But go ahead.
And Edmonton is now just frustrated to the point where they're trying to just play Florida's game. They can't. And Barkov's going to end up playing and Kane's not, and maybe Nurse isn't. And honestly, I didn't give – now we have 2 Ted Starkeys. This is interesting. I didn't give Edmonton that much of a chance in the series anyhow, picking Florida in 5. And I think Pete has a right to say that the media sort of – and look, I liked everything Edmonton did leading up to the Cup. But the media never really took into account, or at least some of the Canadian media never really took into account how good Florida was and how they really were the best team all year. I think most of us could see that.
They didn't take into account how good Florida was, and they pumped up the value of the Oilers. They're a 2-man or 3-man or maybe 4-man team. Hyman, Draisaitl, McDavid, and Bouchard. After that, they're not a good team. They're a 3-man defense. Their goaltender is average, and he's played good at times, and they're not deep. Ted, the Florida bottom 6 are so much better than the Edmonton bottom 6, and I think that's played out during the series. Oh, we lost him for a second. But this is the thing. And this is the thing that drives me crazy. And I vented about this on Hockey Buzz yesterday, and I'll keep venting about it until things change. I am sick and friggin' tired of the goddamn NHL star system bullshit that they pull, where you, like you said, Peter, you put a halo around McDavid and you can't touch him. But if McDavid goes and does something, and Draisaitl's a star, but so is Barkov. So if Draisaitl does something to Barkov,
so is Kachuk.
And so is Kachuk.
So's Bobrovsky. So's what's his face? What's his name? The defenseman of Florida. I'm drawing a blank.
Bouchard.
No, Florida.
Florida, Forsling, Ekblad.
Ekblad. Yeah. Like, you can't pick and choose. Look, I haven't seen anything happen to McDavid yet that is where I would go, come on now, that's flagrant. Nothing's happened. And the thing I would say is, Mike, you brought this up last week in that you said, watch out, Evander Kane's going to start doing something stupid. And you just talked about what he did. It's literally like death taxes and Kane losing his cool.
Right.
Speaking of also losing their cool, I'm not one to always advocate for Paul Maurice as a coach behind the bench. I think he's a very thoughtful person. But is Knobloch getting out-coached right now?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. It's not even
And
close.
is not and now, is he? And is he? Are we starting to see that he's had a heck of a run coming in as a rookie coach? Let's don't minimize what he was able to do to turn around, but it sure helps when you have McDavid and Draisaitl on your team.
Sure. Cures all ills.
But now this is the stuff where a lot of coaches get to these late runs and they realize they haven't progressed as a coach. This is
Right.
what Maurice's second in a row, and I think his third run to the
Yeah.
Stanley Cup Final.
Yeah.
He's gotten to the conference finals, I think, twice, and he's been, he's very composed right now.
Maurice is
in how he's
enjoying
doing
himself in press conferences, and Knobloch isn't. Like that's
Yeah.
that's a telling
Like,
factor.
Yeah,
No, you
Maurice. For once, even though Maurice is the NHL's all-time losingest coach, you still have to play a lot of games to win, to lose a lot.
Sure.
And the fact that he's done that and still gotten to the finals 3 times is very impressive. And, he's locked in right now. And that experience is helping his team. And I bet you it's trickling down to them, particularly when they know there's some pressure on them because of last year. And they know there's some things. And right now, I think Knobloch's in a bit of no man's land for himself. And I know the Oilers have hired the guru who helped Kobe and Michael Jordan in terms of the sports psychologist, and they brought him in, and he's worked with Skinner and stuff. But someone needs to work with Knobloch now because he needs help.
Ted, let me ask you this, because this is my issue. Alex Ovechkin does something that a normal player, a third, fourth liner, does. He doesn't get suspended, but the third or fourth liner does, or Tom Wilson does. Matt Rempe sneezes and he gets a 5-minute major and a game misconduct. The playing field is not level, and it makes the NHL look like what Wayne Gretzky called back in the day a Mickey Mouse, not organization, but a Mickey Mouse league. And I hate that, because this is a great sport, but they look parochial the way they act and the way they call penalties sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a bad playoff officiating wise, and certainly the final hasn't been any better. Like, you're describing some of the examples earlier. And the Panthers, quite clearly, their MO is to wear you down over 7 games. They did it to the Lightning, did it to the Bruins, they did it to the Rangers. This is what they do. They get in your face, and they basically want to grind you down to the point where you don't want to fight back. And I think, the Oilers haven't seen anything like this. The Kings, the Canucks, even Dallas, I was kind of surprised. They kind of gave McDavid a lot of room, which I thought was surprising. And I thought, the Oilers might have a bit of a rude awakening once they face the Panthers, who are, get in your face and make sure you have no space. And I think they're going to have trouble adjusting. And like you were saying with coaching, I think, Knobloch has to realize that and adjust that, the Oilers can't play the way they played the first 3 rounds and succeed against Florida. You're going to have to get dirty. You're going to have to take advantage of the space you get. You can't just get everything you want.
Yeah, and Florida acted the last 3 series now against the Bruins, against the Rangers, and against the Oilers have operated with the same playbook. Pasternak and Marchand, they went after them. They punched Marchand in the face. They played the same game that Marchand does. They walloped Pasternak 2 or 3 times to the point. They ground him into dust, basically, and the only thing that kept the Bruins in that series was Swayman. They did the same thing to the Rangers. They hit Adam Fox all the time. They hit their key players, and they neutralized them, and only because Lafreniere and Goudreau stepped up, and Shesterkin was phenomenal, did they extend that series as far as they did. The Oilers, Bennett slammed McDavid in game 1, bloodied him, and you see what they've been doing throughout the series. I don't think Kane is going to play. The news is right now that Kane, and maybe that's addition by subtraction, because he's been a non-factor for probably like the last round and a half. So, and Darnell Nurse might not play. They say he's going to, but what version of Darnell Nurse is going to play? That's the question. And if he doesn't play, your fallback is Cody Ceci. Oh boy.
Look, even with a team like Florida like this, if you truly have great players on the Edmonton side, which they do, you would think they could at least make it a close series. and they don't even look like they're built to do that. So it's a battle of the GMs. Zito won this battle. He won the battle last year too on most GMs as far as how deep he made his team, and he made it deeper this year. And that's that's another reason he's like right there. I just Bob is great. Bob mentally has been great. Skinner, was actually okay last game until his team just didn't support him enough, and he eventually broke down. That's what's going to happen every other game now, unless Edmonton can get a big lead in a game.
Skinner hasn't lost them games, Peter. It's just Florida is a buzzsaw.
Well, yes, that's exactly it. And I think that goes to show you what a lot of people understood about Florida and who and what they were as a team for 82 games in 3 previous playoff series. But let's just go back a little bit here. Edmonton, they beat the Kings. The Kings weren't anything special. They were a bit of a paper tiger. Right. Then they beat the Canucks, who were also banged up and playing a third-string goalie.
Right, and they went to 7 games.
They took, according to Oilers Twitter, the best offense in the entire NHL and every metric known to man and then some, 7 games to beat a team starting a third-string goalie who had never played a playoff game.
Right.
That's some high-powered offense there. And then they got Ottinger. Let's see who the Panthers have had to play. Like, go down the line. Yeah, it's a completely different run, a completely different experience on the other side in the East. And the Oilers are now facing a team that's had to play far better hockey without those same conditions. Favorable conditions.
Let's morph this into a different argument here, Ted, because I've been for the last few years the advocate of returning to the conference playoff format. And if you look at I give Florida all the credit in the world for if they win this series, having to go through Tampa, Boston, and the Rangers to get to Edmonton, whereas Edmonton's path was, like Peter just said, LA. They avoided Vegas by 1 point. They got LA, they got a wounded Vancouver team, and they got Dallas, who had to go through Vegas and Colorado. You can't tell me that Dallas team was at 100% because they didn't play like it. And I thought they were the much better of the 2 teams, but I give credit to Edmonton for winning it. It should be a more balanced playoff format. And of course, Gary Bettman in his comments to the media was so intransigent about changing anything because the sport is so great right now. God forbid we touch anything. It's ridiculous.
Well, the absurd thing about this whole playoff format is just made for the bracket, which no one plays. I mean, they've been trying to follow the NCAA of let's have the bracket format. They've had it for years. And, you get these matchups and you're getting so many of these good matchups in the second round that by the time you get to the end, it's not necessarily the best hockey. And, to your point with the goaltending, I mean, look at, Florida is facing an easier goaltending they face in any of the 3 rounds. Yes. Edmonton is facing the hardest goalie they've seen after 3 rounds. So, obviously there's adjustment both ways, but like you were saying, Edmonton's got to get it together really soon, maybe with a little bit of home ice with, a little bit better skating surface for passing. But, I can't see them winning more than a game at this point.
It's funny. There's not one guy in Edmonton that I say is playing like Matthew Tkachuk. And I don't mean physically. I just mean mentally strong, not giving up on anything, not giving an inch. I haven't seen one player on the Edmonton roster do this.
Russ, 100%. That is such an astute point. It doesn't mean you're scoring highlight reel goals every time. It doesn't mean you're making huge hits and stuff. You're just in everything. When you're on the ice for your 46 seconds, you're in the game. And if Edmonton had more of that, this series is different right now. And that's such a great observation. Who's that guy who's going to match Tkachuk's energy and focus? Because he's not. There isn't anyone.
If he was healthy, Kane would try. He just is not as good. Hyman will try, and Hyman's a really good player. And I saw Hyman when he's
been invisible.
Yeah, Hyman's been. Now I don't know if he's playing injured. I mean, like I said, everybody's playing injured right now, but Hyman hasn't converted. I mean, I think he had the most goals in the playoffs going into the series. Yeah, and he hasn't done anything. But I mean, one last thing on this, and then we'll move on. Ted, We know this league is a copycat league. And if the Panthers win the Stanley Cup, and Russ and I saw it at the Combine with teams focusing more now on big players, on players who can play multiple positions, on players who got that sandpaper edge. We're going to go down the road where everybody's going to be not looking for the next Tom Wilson because that's a unicorn. Everybody's going to be looking for the next Ryan Lomberg, the next Sam Bennett, the sandpapery guys that you can have 1 through 12 in your lineup that will make the other team hurt. And now I think you're going to see everybody looking for those guys.
Yeah, and I think you've seen it back, when Washington won a couple of years ago, they employed these same tactics. They knew they wanted to they had 7 games to wear the other team out. And I will give one thing I thought about Florida coming into the playoffs. I was not sure how much gas they would have left in the tank after a long run last year, but finishing these series quickly and obviously the layoff before the final, they've been able to sustain it. And, I can't see them running out of gas at this point because I think they're well rested, as well as you're going to be in the playoffs. And I think, it's a really impressive what they're doing right now, but they're just grinding these teams. Every series you see, they kind of started off a little bit slow except for the Tampa series. And then as the series got on, they just got more physical and just, pounding the other team into submission.
And the most important guy,
the Oilers of the Buffalo Bills of the past.
Oh, stop it! Yeah. The most important guy to get the rest is Bobrovsky because at the end against Vegas last year, I mean he was spent, and Florida is implementing what Vegas did against Edmonton last year. They bodied everybody. Pietrangelo, McNabb, Stone. They bodied the Oilers into the ice, and that's what.
You know what the other thing is though. You brought up a good point, Mike, and I did cover that cup. Bob was spent. But if you look at Bob now, he's in better physical condition. He's thinner. Yeah. He's faster to the corners. So he understood what happened last year to him and probably said, not again. And he's made good on it.
And if he adds a Stanley Cup to his 2 Vezinas, he's a Hall of Famer. I mean, he might be a Hall of Famer already, but that'll be the cherry on top of the sundae to a Hall of Fame career.
Even though everybody killed that contract and everybody thought he was washed up, and we all probably thought at some point he might be washed up.
3 years ago, I think it was justified, but now it's like he's made 2 Cup Finals. Now, yeah, of course it looks great. All right, Ted, I wanted to talk about this. A couple days ago, it was announced that the Washington Capitals were purchasing the website CapFriendly, and I think it's 2 or 3 guys who run the site and feed it. It's something that I look at every day. The contract information, no movement clauses, the calculators that they use. It's an asset that a lot of media uses, but a lot of fans use. And the thing that disturbs me, again, it's this sort of out of sight, out of mind attitude of the NHL, where the NHL through the Capitals, basically they're saying, the Capitals are taking it over. The site's going to go away as of July 5th. And now there are other sites like Puckpedia who will try to pick up the slack for it. But the NHL is in denial where they're saying, well, the fans don't care about contracts. It's a cap league. A website like Spot Track may try to pick up the slack here because their Puckpedia is probably going to have some competition. But in a cap league, people care about no movement clauses and agents and the breakdown of things, and they're lying to themselves or they're doing it on purpose, saying that the fans don't care about it when they actually do.
Yeah, it was really a surprise to me when this happened because, of any of the teams that would buy CapFriendly just to get the personnel, I would not put Washington in the top 10. I could see, the big spenders, Toronto, the Rangers, other teams. But I was surprised. My first thought was, they're going to try to incorporate the other Ted is a big media guy. Maybe he was trying to, build up support. So I was really kind of surprised when they did this. And, it seems like, it's like people were saying, it builds interest in the game to know what teams are doing. I mean, I think in this case, Washington already looked like they were going to be a big player in the offseason because of the cap space they're going to open up. And so this kind of reinforces my thinking that they're going to be active, at least trade-wise this offseason. But, to take that kind of information away. Obviously, the NHL's had this happen before with Cap Geek, in 2015. Obviously, that went offline. CapFriendly took its place, and presumably Puckpedia or somebody else is going to come in. But, I don't know why. I guess it's just some teams, there's a local team that will barely acknowledge any signing, let alone what they signed for.
Yeah.
Parisi is signed for 2 months, but they don't announce it, so it's not official. So I would have a feeling that some of these owners who are the opposite side of the spectrum saying we don't want this information out so fans can speculate, but that's part of the fun.
Peter, I mean, this is sort of like online whack-a-mole. It's you have a website, they build it up, it draws a lot of interest, it's innovative, and then somebody buys them and then they go away. But the interest is still there. And I said on Twitter a couple hours ago, I said, what fans need to do is now get completely behind Puckpedia. And because Puckpedia will probably do a lot of upgrades to their system and provide a lot of the information, maybe be innovative like CapFriendly was, and get to the point where they are. But then somebody's going to buy Puckpedia. You've got to keep having people who are entrepreneurial go out there and keep setting up these websites, because there's interest there. There is, there's money to be made if it's owning the site or then maybe even selling the site, but it needs to keep going. And this bull crap that the NHL says there's no interest. There's a ton of interest.
Oh, where do I even begin? So I work in the world's oldest data profession, which is insurance. I do consulting work. I have another business in it. Everything we do revolves around data. Public data, private data, customer data, you name it, just like most other sales organizations. One of the things that most people forget when they get into data and stuff is most companies think, oh, I need this data solution for things. What they actually really need is not technology around your industry. So in my industry, it's called InsurTech. What you mostly need is marketing tech, because marketing tech is really kind of the predecessor of what this is. CapFriendly should have been bought by the NHL, and they should have monetized it in ways that were going to all the teams. There is not just a lack of vision, foresight, or anything to do with growing the sport to keep it entertaining and not lose things, as MLS is about to pass it in popularity soon. The WNBA will probably already has.
No, it hasn't. Stop.
It's a matter of time. It's a matter of time, Russ.
Unless they injure the golden goose like they seem intent on doing. But go ahead.
It's a matter of time. And the NHL continues to hold on to legacy concepts that have always played well when you've had strong niche markets in Original Six and expansion into Canada that will float your boat. You can't think that way anymore. You have to think with ingenuity, with innovation, and with an idea of what makes things more interesting. The hardcore fans, the ones that they think don't care, we're all the ones who make up the volume of your business. They really don't have an understanding of who drives the business of the NHL and who helps keep things alive. The NHL is a niche sport. It's a big niche sport, but when Jay Onrait and Dan O'Toole went down to the States and took their act down into Fox Sports, they came back, and when they came back to Canada, they said, we didn't realize how fringe hockey was. Those two were arguably the biggest and most important watch thing in Canada for entertainment when it came to hockey, and understood it. When they come back and say how fringe it is, you start to have to realize the people who live in the media know.
Well,
and they came back, and the NHL does nothing to help make it better. Ted's a reporter. Russ has a website. Mike, you do. We've all used these websites. We use the publicly available data too and stuff. This is what keeps interest alive. It forms new stories. The NHL should buy CapFriendly, strip it down so there's a basic front end for the fans, and then let all the teams use it. Because apparently the teams are using it anyways because the NHL doesn't provide them anything.
Russ, that was the interesting thing. One of the reasons why the Caps bought it is because other NHL teams are using it and they want it as proprietary information. So I mean, well,
that's always that's business, right? But that's,
good on the Caps, like smart move.
It's a smart move by the Caps. It's a little surprising for some, I think, because I've been asking around. A lot of front offices are not automated like you think they should be. They're not. And not all decisions are made because they have all this hard data like they would get from CapFriendly and everything else. They're not. And so the Caps, instead of trying to create the wheel, decided to just buy that wheel, keep it from other teams, and have it for themselves, the buyout calculator and all those other things that are good, because they're keeping an eye on other teams, but not to the degree that was able to do it. Now, the only reason that any of these websites can do well is either they have to get a couple of agents to give them the information or other sources. So the league could shut it all down if they really wanted it to. It's like, don't act like the league is, they could shut it all down, but they haven't. They just want it to go to a certain degree, and that's it as far as what we all find out. That's what it seems like.
To that point, hang on. Back when we had the Vegas expansion draft and we knew all this wheeling and dealing was going on, I think it was Darren Dredger, who I'm not a huge fan of, said, we'll find out. We're usually pretty good at this stuff. And as a collective thing with the media. And sure enough, we started finding out before it all happens. You can't, the NHL's been it has more holes than a Dutch dike in 16.
Sure, I mean, I'm not going to say no,
and it's never going to get plugged.
But this should be a wake up call to the other 31 teams around the league. Like, hey,
Gary, if you're listening to this, and I know you're a big fan, Gary, I'll solve your problem for $100,000 US consulting fee. I'll tell you exactly how to do it and what it means for all teams. It's actually so ridiculously easy that it's insane the NHL hasn't done it already.
Well, but it's the team's responsibility. That's why it's really the team's responsibility.
But the whole thing here, Ted, is the only reason that there is a hunger for websites like General Manager or Cap Geek or CapFriendly is because we're in a cap system, and you have to track every dollar, and you have to be able to plug in and fit these players, 50% retained, 25% retained, all the machinations. If it was a non-cap system and you had the New York Rangers bidding $9 million a year on Bobby Holik and there was no cap, nobody would give a shit.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, come February, everyone wants to figure out, how can this guy figure out under someone's cap? And, that was the fun of, credit to CapFriendly. They made a great site. It was so useful. And obviously I'll miss it once it goes dark, but, it keeps interest in the league. And I always like to say about the NHL is a league that thrives despite itself.
Yes.
I was actually talking to a former beat writer today, and we were saying, go back to 1993. What if the league hadn't done some of these lockouts and missteps? How big would this league be compared to what it is now? And it's just, it's a great game, so it survives. But, they kind of let some of the minority owners control the ship. And, like teams like we mentioned before, who want to keep everything private, and that's not in the best interest of the game, but because they have a very loud opposition to letting data out, the league follows the mandate because they don't want to, upset any apple carts. So I think, in this case, I'm sure that someone's going to step in because agents are going to want the data to come out because they want teams to know how much they have to spend and how they can spend it because, it's in their best interest.
Well,
I
don't know because I've looked at Spot Track for baseball and football. I don't know whether they have a hockey component to them. They may. If they do, they have a mechanism there where they have, like in baseball, they have all the information breakdown year by year. Football, the same thing. It probably wouldn't be a big thing for them to do that, but it'll also be, it may not be that much of an impact because hockey is very parochial. It's very, it's not going to be as big a splash as NBA contract information or Major League Baseball information. It's a boutique sport, as Peter is saying. So, but really, the NHL is in denial. People want information, and this say, "Oh, nobody wants the cap information." Bull crap. And I'm a member of the media, so it doesn't, what I'm saying doesn't matter. But there are a ton of fans who are pissed off right now that CapFriendly is going to be going dark in 3 weeks. It's ridiculous. So anyway,
what makes? Oh, I was going to say too, what makes the NHL so different? It's the hard cap. Baseball is the luxury tax. Football, you can just cut a guy if you want to have cap room. NHL, you can't escape a bad contract without having to do something.
Right. Okay, some rumor stuff before we end the show. We'll go to what Russ was talking to me in the DM in a minute, but I just wanted to start with the Markstrom stuff, because Markstrom, until he gets traded, which I'm fairly sure he's going to be, it seemed like, he was going to be traded at the deadline, and then something did not work out between Calgary and New Jersey. Calgary pulled back at the last second. It sounds like he's going to get traded. It's just a question of where, Ted. And I know Elliot Friedman, who we know he's tied in as anybody. He's saying New Jersey, but he's also out there saying possibly Ottawa, possibly Toronto. Anytime Toronto's name comes up, and I'm not saying Elliot is serving somebody's agenda, but every time Toronto comes up as part of a negotiation with another team, they're putting Toronto out there just to raise the attention. I don't think that there's a big market in Toronto for Markstrom, because he's making $6 million and they can't afford it. They'd love to get the goalie, but he's just too damn expensive. So, I think he's going to go to New Jersey. But what are your thoughts on Markstrom?
Yeah, I think, this offseason, I'm going to be so fascinated by the goaltending, because if you look at the UFA list for goaltenders this year, at best, it's a backup. You're not getting someone. If you're a contender, you cannot sign a UFA and expect to contend next year. So you're going to have to get an Ullmark. You're going to have to get a Markstrom. Even a guy like Darcy Kemper, who in a normal year with that contract is so toxic, right, he may get interest just because there are not many good goalies out there and a lot of teams that need them. But, I agree with you on Markstrom. I think he's a little bit too pricey for Toronto. I think they may they're definitely going to look for somebody, but you're probably going to have to get creative to do so.
Well, Peter, the name, and Tony just mentioned it in the chat, the name that's coming up in Toronto. And if you think that Laurent Brossoit is the answer in terms of a tandem goalie with Joseph Woll, Joseph Woll, the most games he's played as a pro, I think, was 30 games, and Brossoit is a 20 to 25 goal game backup. And he's a good backup, but he played behind one of the best team defenses in the NHL. That's why his stats were so ridiculous. I don't think he's anything more than a good number 2. He's not a 1B or a 1A. And, I don't think if that's Toronto's answer, that's not a good answer.
Well, I think the question with Brossoit is, you don't know what happens if he has to start playing more than 30 games. That's the unknown. And are you prepared? I can't remember how old he is. I think he's
31.
31. Okay. Are you prepared to go that route at 31 years old? Yeah, that's a risky move. But to do a 1A, 1B, you better have a 1A. Right? Like, don't get a 1B and then just anoint someone else 1A. Know who your 1A is, right?
Well,
it's kind of the weird way of doing it.
Toronto thinks that Woll is a 1A. It's just and I think he's got 1A ability. He doesn't have 1A durability, and that's the question. He gets hurt every year. If he doesn't get hurt, he could play 45 to 50 games, and they'd get good production out of him. He just can't stay healthy, and I don't know if that changes. That's the problem. So
yeah, I think New Jersey's the one team that's just willing to overbid for Markstrom.
Right,
they'll probably be the one.
Now, Russ, what was it you were going to bring up?
Yeah, the hockey news. I saw a quote where Bradshaw Living. This article posted an hour ago. I missed who it was.
Probably David.
Yeah, it may have been. And it just basically said Brad Treliving expects to get 2 really good defensemen in free agency. And I'm thinking, with what money, Brad? Who's really good? Who's really good for $2.5 million?
It depends on your definition of really good. I mean,
no doubt.
Really good in his eyes and really good in the eyes of almost everybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, if he does go out and get 2 really good defensemen in free agency, Ted, then he's not re-signing Bertuzzi. He's not re-signing Max Domi, and he has a home for Mitch Marner if he signs.
It's so hard to understate how dangerous this free agent pool is, because with the cap going up, there's going to be a lot of stupid money spent on mediocre players. And as the Buffalo Sabres know, if you spend poorly on free agents, you're going to really screw yourself over for years to come. And I think teams would be smart to try to take advantage and trade, get some a little bit more expensive RFAs, perhaps take some chances on contracts that are a little bit high. But, there's maybe 5 free agents I think I would even consider signing. And I mean, like, talking about goaltender, the best goaltender on the list is probably the guy who's facing charges in London. It's such a bad market, and there's really, if you're a mediocre team, fine, you can sign one of these guys. But if you're a contender signing one of these goaltenders and think you're going to win a Stanley Cup, you really need to get a new profession, because it's just not going to happen with this group.
Well, Russ, I mean, like I can't say 100% for sure anybody is going anywhere, because how the hell would I know? But I have been told by people that they believe that Chris Tanev is going to end up in Toronto. Now, if he does, and he's 34 years old and he's had a history of injuries, I mean, he played really well in the playoffs this year, you're probably going to have to overpay him, or you're probably going to have to give him more term than you normally, which means 5 years for a 34-year-old. And then at the end, the last 2 or 3 years, right, the last 2 or 3 years of the contract, if you're prepared to have him on LTIR, and then that's fine.
He's going to make the lion's share of their extra money. I saw the other thing is he said he has interest in bringing Bertuzzi back and bringing these guys back with very little term. Well, they probably want more term, of course.
Right. Well, right. And I mean, you could say, okay, well, you're going to pay Tanev what TJ Brody was making last year, which was $5 million. So if you pay him $5 million, okay, so now your cap, now what you have left is $13 million to sign everybody else, and that's not enough. That's why what they do with Marner or Tavares or whoever they can find some way to move out. That's going to be the key to. I could see them trading, and I'll put the tentacles out there for extra living guys, because he seems to like the guys that he had previously. I could see them making a trade with Columbus and getting Erica Branson, who he had in Calgary. Right hand, right-handed, tough
defense. Not really good. I can tell you.
Oh no, and Peter, about Branson from Vancouver. I mean, he's a limited mobility guy, but he's big and tough and smart. So I mean, you could do worse than to have that guy on your bottom pairing, but he's a $4 million defenseman.
Smart might be a stretch, but I think Treliving saying that he's going to do that implies 2 things. One, he's trying to basically set a status level of what he's getting before he gets them. So people, which is, you're doomed to fail when you do that, because no one's ever going to agree. Or 2, he knows he's going to have more cap room. And, whether it's right or wrong, salary amounts tend to go to status and what people's expectations are, right or wrong. So in this case, I think Treliving's probably playing with the idea that he knows something's going to change. Right. If he's really going to speak that boldly, because I just think he's in the wrong market to set that expectation and then not underdeliver.
Right. If he says I'm going to add 2 really good defensemen, and he goes out and signs Dylan DeMello, and I'm saying, I mean,
DeMello wouldn't be a bad thing for him to get.
No, but when you say
he's not going to get him for the budget he needs.
Right. When you say really good defenseman, then in the mind of a lot of people, they're thinking Pesce, they're thinking Montour, they're thinking.
Yeah.
And unless you got a trade that you're trading Marner for a bunch of draft picks, you don't have the cap space to spend. That's $11 million for those two defensemen more than likely, and you don't have that. So I don't know. We'll see. But okay, we'll end it there, and we'll be back on Friday after Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. For the departed Russ Cohen, for Peter Tessier, for Ted Starkey, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.